commissioners will open their meeting for the sake of the joint meeting with council.
David, we should reopen council. Council reopens their meeting. Yeah. That's. Good, ready? Yeah. Is this the council or is this a joint meeting? Joint meeting, council and commissioners. Thanks, Kendall, for coming. Appreciate it. Sure. So I'm Kendall Culp. I'm here, I wear a couple different hats, but I'm here as a representative of Indiana Farm Bureau today. Matt had invited me to come, and I've given this presentation to some other counties. I am a state representative, District 16, which used to include this area, the northern 2/3 when Representative Dupline was in. I look forward to being part of that district, but when they redistricted, Duke County went to District 11 where Aylesworth. By the way, I was with him last night and sends his regards, and he had another meeting to go to because I invited him and told him what I was going to be doing here today. So in my 4 counties, which are Jasper, Pulaski, Stark, and White, as far as the legislators, I've given this presentation to 3 of them, and Stark is next Monday to finish that out. But then there's some other counties, Farm Bureau counties, that have asked for the presentation, and so I've done that as well. So it's just kind of a wrap up of the legislative session, as well as talking about Senate Bill 1 and a little bit about the budget. I'm sure you're all interested in those impacts. And I have a little bit of data specific to Newton County. So some of the highlights of the session, obviously there's the long session. So the long session every other year is the budget session, of which that takes center stage. And this is kind of a unique session in a lot of ways, but one ways the budget really, while it was a priority, it wasn't the top focus priority. Senate Bill 1, well, property tax reform really took center stage. And that's what took a lot of the work. So since the budget started in the House, Senate Bill 1 obviously started in the Senate. They took the governor's proposal and looked at that, and then they kind of reworked that through the Senate, then through the House, and then through the conference committee. We'd also talked a lot about energy, which I will get into this morning, and healthcare and transportation. I have one slide at the end on transportation. So there are a lot of changes this year at the State House, a new governor, the lieutenant governor, a lot of new members, 11 new House members, 2 new Senate members. So a lot of change at the General Assembly this year. Again, this was a contested, of course, governor election. We hadn't had one of those in 8 years as far as a new governor. And so there were a lot of candidates on both sides of the aisle. All of them ran on a platform of lowering property taxes. Now, as you probably know, my background, I was 18 years as a Jasper County Commissioner before I became state representative. So I'm very passionate about local funding and understand where that goes and the needs are in the local community. So when you say, it's pretty easy to say, oh yeah, we want to cut your property tax bill. Well, how are you going to replace that revenue so you can continue to offer the services obviously you need to in your county? So the budget, the next slide kind of gives a breakdown, a pie chart of the budget. Normally K-12 education makes up half of the state budget. While it did increase dollar wise, the percentage went down to 47% because the Medicaid pie grew substantially. Medicaid expenditures are growing and outpacing all other areas within the budget. And so again, while there was more money, over 700,000 new dollar or 700 million new dollars went to K-12 education, the percentage of that still dropped because of that. So you do the budget 4 times a year. There's a fiscal forecast. that comes out that really anticipates future revenue coming into the state. So a lot of that would be sales tax, income tax, for example, gaming revenue. And so they knew that would come out a week before our session in the end of April. That came out and it was a pretty ugly forecast. It showed that Indiana, they expected 2.4 billion with a B dollars less revenue coming in than what they anticipated when they built the budget. So we had a week to find $2.4 billion. Now, I think that's a little overstated. A lot of the tariff situation from the federal level, but a lot of, I think, a damper and a black cloud over the revenue forecast. Will it be that bad? We don't know, but we couldn't pass a budget that showed more expenditures than revenue predicted coming in. So we had to find $2.4 billion. So the governor had already taken a 5% across the board cut for most departments. There were some exceptions, obviously. FSSA was one because of the shortfall there. State police did not take a cut. Our correctional facilities were in the rears. And I don't know if you house prisoners in Newton County, but a lot of those counties that do were not getting recompensated their $35 a day or $38 a day. So they built that in. So some of those did not get a cut. But because of that shortfall, the governor suggested another 5% cut or 10%. So there was 5%, so it says on there 5 plus 5. So 5%, and then they were asked you to withhold another 5% of your approved budget. And you had to really ask permission and quantify why you needed that money. So most all departments realized that meant a 10% cut. And so that's what they're after. Department of Agriculture, for example, small department, they took a 17% cut because they had a $600,000 line item that was totally deleted. So a big cut for a lot of other departments. There was one tax we did increase, and that was the tobacco tax. It was going to raise about $700 million over the biennium if we raised income tax. Cigarette taxes hadn't been raised in Indiana since 2007. They're 99.5 cents a pack, so say $1 a pack. July 1st, they went to $3 a pack. That's the tax. So tobacco, snuff, leaf tobacco, vaping products, those all increased to like 30-35% tax to help make up that shortfall. So that was a big revenue source that in addition to all the other budget cuts. Let's go on to the next slide. So just real quickly, a little bit about some of the different departments within the budget. Again, 2% each year, K through 12 raise. So in the second cut to find the $2.4 billion, education did not take a cut. Now they only got a 2% raise originally. That was the governor's proposal. That didn't change. So we all know the schools are taking a big hit with Senate Bill 1 as well. So at least they did not see a cut in their revenue source. School choice, the voucher program. Again, Governor Braun ran on making that to where that was available to everybody. Currently, there's income tax limits, income limits, where if you make if your income is like over $240,000, you weren't eligible for a voucher in the second year of the budget. So the next fiscal year, every student in Indiana will be eligible for a voucher, no matter what the income is of their parents. And so that was funded in year 2. The last thing on there, I'll just say real quick, there was a few things, you always hear about things that get slipped into a bill at the end of the session. Well, that's what that one is. There was 3 things added in at the end in the budget. Statute says that you have to post the budget 24 hours before it can be voted on. That way it can be looked through. It was about yay thick. I read it during that 24-hour period. And at the end of that, there was a couple lines in there that most universities have 3 trustees that were appointed by the alumni. Purdue's the same way, but for whatever reason, IU was singled out, and it said that those 3 trustees would now be appointed by the governor, which most of the rest of them were already appointed by the governor. So obviously they made somebody mad, and so that was included. There's a school in Randolph County, eastern side of the state. It's called Union School. It has less than 300 students, K through 12. There was a line in there to eliminate that school. I think that's kind of bad policy. There was no discussion, there was no hearing, there was no bill filed. However, they have worked within the system that was created by the state, and they have a virtual school of 6,000 students. that learn virtually from that school, they're eligible for that same voucher, which is 85% of what a public school is. So they were funding their public school with this voucher revenue, which really wasn't the intent, but they were doing it within the system. And so the powers to be decided we're just going to eliminate that school. So there's lawsuits filed against that to try to keep that open. So that was another thing that was kind of slipped in. And so those are things you've got to be watchful, mindful for as you're looking through those big comprehensive bills. Other provisions on the next slide. Again, IEDC, doing Indianapolis, you see the big LEAP project. It's north of Lebanon, where Lily's building. Very controversial with the prior administration, so their budget was cut by a fourth. Not that that's not important as far as economic growth, but there have been a lot of dollars, a lot of ARPA dollars, federal dollars, CARES Act money funneled into IEDC, great investments for the state. When those federal dollars have dried up, you've got to cut that out of your budget. And so that was one area that Indiana invested a lot of those monies in IEDC. Now those dollars are being pulled back out. Local health department, Mike Ganstertine here. As you know, 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, there was the Blue Ribbon Commission. They came up, child mortality rates in Indiana, we were one of the highest states with that rate. We're a more unhealthy state. And so we decided that there needs to be more funding for health departments. I was a commissioner at that time, and I was really pleased to think that they let you, if you opted in the program, you at the county level decided what's the best avenue to invest that money in your county with your people to be a healthier county. There weren't a lot of strings attached to it, so that was really good. And I don't know what you've done with your health department in your county, but they had so far had spent at the level of about 40% of what their total dollars were allocated. So the governor decided that we would just freeze it at that level. So I know in Jasper County, they were wanting to build a clinic and have nursing staff or nurse practitioners on staff. And so they were ramping up to that, but haven't spent the full amount yet. So obviously they're going to have a plan B. So that money was frozen. So you're still getting more money, but it's not going to be as much as originally had thought. So you can see the CO2 language there next to the last. That was one other thing that was put in the budget. I will say with that, at least it passed out of the House. It was an introduced bill that passed, didn't get a hearing in the Senate. So they put that in, and basically what that does, it establishes a fund that if there is sequestration and they have to pay that fee per ton back to the state in case there's a problem, it distinguishes that that's going to be in a standalone fund, not just put in the state general fund. So it doesn't allow it, it just sets up the parameters for it if it takes place. And then we froze our salaries as well. Didn't feel like we should take a raise from other people who were being cut. But getting on into the tax part of it, property tax relief and reform. I'm more of a reformer, but the immediate concern was relief. That's what people were seeing their bills. They're saying this is too high, it's growing, we've got to have relief. And the makeup of the General Assembly is changing, as you can imagine. Rural districts are getting larger and less of them. So you're in a Newton County, just think of Representative Aylesworth. So if you know where he lives on the Kankakee River, but on the Porter County side, straight north of DeMont. So he's on that side. He has Hebron, so he has that portion of Porter. He has Lowell, which is that portion of Lake, and he has Newton all the way down to Iroquois, Washington counties. He has all the way down. He doesn't have Goodland or Kentland, and he has DeMont and Wheatfield. So that's bigger in my county. That's the bigger growth area. He has 0 mayors. He has no towns in that district. Think about that. And that's kind of interesting. My district, I have 3 mayors, 3 cities, but very rural. The southern part of your district is Representative Commons, who lives in the Attica area. So he has like I said, Kentland and Goodland, vast and huge sprawling. He has 6 counties, I believe. And so there's just fewer and fewer of us to represent rural interests in the state. So this property tax relief was all about giving homeowners relief. It wasn't about giving business. Well, business did get relief, and everybody got some relief, but it wasn't about farmers. It wasn't about rural areas. It was only about homeowners, which in my mind already get a lot of relief for their homestead deduction and their supplemental deduction. We'll get into that a little bit later. So what's growing in the state house are the suburban suburban districts. In my district, when Gutwein retired, then he and Leahy got put together. Leahy's from Brookstead, White County. He retired, and so you had this big district, and so Leahy's district was 25. That's now a district in Westfield. So it just got moved down to a Collier County, and that's what happens with a lot of our representation. So our voice isn't nearly as strong as it used to be. I did have a bill, the box, the lower on the left, to change the capitalization rate of farmland from 8% to 10%. You can see the compromise they reached was 9%. So to find your assessed value, if you have a home, it's on market, it's based on market value. Agricultural land is not based on market value, it's on value and use. So it's what does it produce and what's the value of what it produces. And so that's the way that is. And so you take a complicated formula from Purdue, cash rent, input costs, commodity prices, you average those together, divide it by a capitalization rate and interest rate to get your assessed value. And the higher the interest rate, the lower your answer is going to be. So that's why we wanted to raise that rate. Rates have gone up obviously anyway, raised it to 9%, which meant our number was going to be less. And you can see on the chart there, the red line on top is where it would have been if it would have stayed at 24.20 an acre. And under the new cap rate that I proposed, it's going to be 16.50 an acre. So it's going to go down. We all know about the ag economy, and what we're producing on our farmland is all less valuable now and lower prices. And so it's probably a good time for that to happen. So if you look then on the next slide, you've got the 1%, 2%, 3% caps that were under property tax caps that went under in the Daniels administration. Again, the homesteads are in the 1% cap. That's what gets most of the attention. And so besides this early relief, so the relief part, which again, I think is less valuable, but it's instant relief, is they have given a 10% reduction or cut on your home value on your next property tax bill that comes out in 2026. And so cap that at $300. So when that bill left the House and the Senate, we agreed that it would be 7.5% cap or $200. And went to the governor. The governor said, that's not enough. I ran on this. I'll veto this. I need more relief. So they negotiated a $300 cap or 10%. So in other words, if you come down on your bill and your bill for your home is $1,000, you could get 10% of that off. So you'll pay $900 instead of $1,000, right? And then if it's $4,000, then you're going to max out at the 10%. You're going to max out at the $300. So you'll pay $300 less. That's a direct cut to local government. That's not a shift. All of those are cuts. And so that's a big concern as well. Then you go to the rest of the 1%. Is they said, okay, that's the relief part. The reform part is we want to give you more deduction. So currently you get the $45,000 homestead deduction, and you get the 35% supplemental deduction for your higher valued homes. The 35% goes away, and beginning in 2028, phased in for 2030, pay 31, 2/3 of the value of your home is going to be deducted. Will not be assessed on 2/3 of your value. So if you have $300,000 value home, you're only going to pay taxes on $100,000. That's a huge deduction. Now, that's not a loss, that's a shift. So all of that tax loss will now be shifted in the 2% and 3% tax category, which will go to 2% now. 2% is where your farmland is at. Rental units, additional housing beyond your homestead fall into this. Now, ag doesn't get, again, nobody else gets that instant cut off the bottom of your taxes. Only housing. So farmland, we're going to get 1/3 of our assessed value chopped off by beginning in 2028, phased in. So if the value of your farmland is $1,500 of what the formula shows, you're going to pay taxes on $1,000. Homestead's got 2/3. Farmland got 1/3. Now, I will say this, so that this is kind of sensitive with me. this is the only place that we got sunsetted, agriculture got sunsetted. This was only gonna be good for 2 years. After 2 years, if they don't act, it goes back to the full value, they could get taxed on. And if they do act, they could say, we're gonna take off more, or we're just gonna stay at the 1/3. But nobody else gets another look after 2 years, which it just doesn't look fair to me, but that's where we're at. So we're gonna try to get that changed in the upcoming sessions. So that's what now again, this loss of tax revenue, it shifted some of it back to the 1% in the homeowners and some forward to the 3% in the business and business personal property. So moving on to 3%, and there's a lot happened in this as well, especially the last week of the session. Business personal property. So if you file a 102, as a farmer, I file a form 102, list all of the purchases that we've made, list all the equipment that I have on the farm. And when it was purchased, the purchase price, and then you put those in pools, and those pools keep moving every year down the list. You always come down to the 30% floor. So I like to use the example of my grandpa's M tractor that sits back in the corner that I'm just saving because it was my grandpa's. I'm always paying 30% tax on what he paid for that. Now, that's not a lot of dollars, but it's been written off and depreciated out decades ago. But in Indiana, we still pay taxes on that. That doesn't seem right either. So they wanted to eliminate the floor, but that is a big cost. My assessor in Jasper County told me like 79% of the assessed value in personal property is at the 30% floor in Jasper County. So it's a big number. The other thing about that is in Jasper County, we have a power plant, a coal plant. Most all of that is business personal property. If you have a solar farm, if you have a wind farm, most of that is business personal property. And if you take that away, then the counties that's located in, all of that revenue source goes away. And what is the incentive then to cite one of those in your county if there's no financial benefit? So those are things that not everybody understands. I keep reiterating that, and hopefully we can get some more change and modification in that law as well. So what they did on the 30% floor is anything purchased from January 1st of this year moving forward will not be subject to the 30% floor. It eventually will depreciate completely out. So that's how they're phasing that out. And then the de minimis is the amount when you start paying taxes or start filing the 102 form, personal property form. So if you own a beauty salon in Kentland, for example, and your equipment inside, you paid $25,000 for when you bought it, that's under the 80, you don't file that form currently at all. So that has changed, the number has changed over the years, but that's the floor. Beginning in January 1 of 26, that 80,000 goes to $2 million. Now we're going to connect most farmers. My assessor says there's only 26 farmers in Jasper County that have equipment valued of over $2 million based on when they purchase. So if you purchased a used tractor, the value on that is not the new purchase, but the purchase price when you bought it, and that stays on there. So we're going to catch a lot of people now in this 2 million. If you're under that, you do not have to file a 102 beginning in January 1st of 26. Again, a lot less revenue coming in to locals because of that. Very business friendly, but that's a concern. So savings in cap 3, it shifted back to cap 2, it shifted back to cap 1. So there's a lot of shifts going on back and forth with these 3 caps. So talk about a little bit about the loss. And actually I've got some numbers, and I apologize because I had the state sent me some numbers last night, and I tried to verify some of them, get my phone here, to make sure I understood that. But the loss in Newton County as a whole, as a county government, is about 5%. Have you done any Baker Tilly work? No, have you guys checked?
Yeah, I don't have numbers.
Yeah, they haven't gotten us numbers yet, but okay, so most taxi units are doing that. It's showing this here. Yeah, it's showing, well, here, you've got, this is for a county as a whole. So this is your estimated net levy in fiscal year 25, 8.1 million. fiscal year 26, 8.6 million. This is before Senate Bill 1 takes effect. Fiscal year 27, 9.1 million, fiscal year 28, just about 6 million. That's anticipated revenue coming in from your different funding sources. That's homestead, farmland base rate, growth quotient, all of those things combined. Now, after Senate Bill 1 takes effect in the budget, those go down. So 2026, you'll lose 401,000, 27, 474,000, 28, 476,000, or that's 5%. So it's a big loss. So every year that loss continues to grow. So you say, well, what do we do? How do we make that up? And luckily, other than schools, everybody's given another funding source to make those revenues back. Schools, in my mind, are a big loser here. They do not have an alternative funding source to make up for that lost revenue that they're going to face. So local income tax that's the funding source that you're given. Where are you at currently? What's your rate in county? 1%. You're the lowest in the state. I mean, there's others at 1, but nobody's lower than 1. Everybody has at least 1. And I'm going to give you some examples here. How much of that is for property tax replacement? Zero. Right, zero. None of that is to replace property. Other counties have adopted a higher local income tax rate to bring down their property tax rates. Some do that, some don't do that. The Newton County has not done that to this point. So you can see now counties are going to given a rate of up to 1.2%. So you're already at 1. So you still have capacity. You're in a unique position most counties aren't in because you're not at your maximum. If you need to raise more revenue because your loss of property, the state's suggesting that you raise it through income tax. Now, I'm a big income tax proponent. I'm not a property tax proponent because you have a lot more people paying income tax in your county than you have paying property tax. And it looks like that's fair to spread that burden out amongst more taxpayers. So if you are a city and town greater than 3,500, so help me with that. You don't have one. So Kentland's smaller. So everybody now county council, here's where you come in. Cities and towns with lower than 3,500. So Morocco, Lake Village, Brook, Goodland, Kentland, Morocco, you guys, you're all there. The county council sets that rate for those municipalities. So they don't set their own. Now, if you're over 3,500, the city council, for example, Rensselaer would set their own. They can do that. But if you're a smaller community like yours, you have to come to council. They can come to you and ask for a rate. You can tell them yes. You can tell them no. You can alter what they ask for, but you have to live within that 1.2%. Now, in some counties, the highest county right now is 3%. It's Randolph County. This is capped at 2.9. So there's only one county that's really in Indiana this is going to be, could be less, and that's Randolph. Now, Jasper's really close. We're like 2.86. So we're 5th highest in the state. So there's not as much capacity. You can gain more capacity. In your case, you could gain it all from the under 3,500 population. You can gain up to 75% of that 1.2% and add on to your 1.2. If you need more capacity to do that, that's why it's important for the council to consider this countywide. Is, are you going to give Morocco a rate, but you're not going to give, Goodland a rate? Probably not, but that's your choice to do that, to pick and choose how you want to. So again, you can use, so you're going to be at about, you could be at about a 1.9 if you use all of your 75% of the small towns and add it to your 1.2. Now, this doesn't apply to you, but if you're in a county with a city that adopts the 1.2, they pay the city and the county. So they're at 2.4 if they take the full amount. So that's kind of a disincentive, I think, for the people in the city, because they're paying double or could be paying double. Do you have a question?
I think you kind of answered my question as far as if, to say, for example, Kentland did this, well, we've got Lincoln and Lake that don't have towns, don't have town councils and this and that. So that was kind of my question of what if the town took that on, but then council decided, so.
Yeah, yeah.
So they would do that double.
So the county council has gained a lot of authority in Centerville. A lot of power now rests within a county council that you didn't have before. So that's good to know. EMS and fire has a rate of up to 0.4 and libraries 0.2. So now because EMS and fire, if that's township ran, they're probably going to take somewhat of a cut through the property tax, lowering the property taxes. So that makes that up. I know EMS, that you guys know, is very expensive, especially if you're full-time. A lot of competition for those paramedics. And so I don't know if that's enough, but at least they've identified that can be an additional rate that doesn't necessarily exist today. Now, I did a little work and I used Newton County in some of my talks in other counties. Let's see, I got that on my phone here. And just how much difference that makes. Here we go. With the property tax replacement. So I know a taxpayer that lives in Newton, that owns farmland in Newton, that also owns farmland in Jasper. And so I asked them for their tax statements and they sent those to me. And so they own 40 acres in Jasper. And so they've given me their installments and their per acre, so I divided it out, is $20.42 an acre. Now that includes a little drainage assessment too. Both of these are gonna have a little drainage assessments, not much. $20.42. They own 45 acres in Newton, bare farmland. Divide that out, $43.73 an acre. It's over double, 43 versus 20 in the two. Why is that? Because there's a higher income tax rate in Jasper to lower, so about 0.7% is for property tax relief. So here's my concern. All of the tax you have, your 1% gets eliminated with Senate Bill 1. Now, I think that's very unfair. They want you to readopt. So everybody's saying, okay, we've got a new formula, we got a new system, the slate's clean, start over. Now, in the case of a county with a higher income tax, those are hard votes to take. I don't have to tell you anything. I remember when Jasper went to they had an ABC, it was local option income tax, LOIT. You had property tax replacement, you had a budget freeze, and then you got to option C, which is 0.25 of public safety. And we used to use that for EMS, now it's for the sheriff's department. But you had to adopt the relief to get to the new money. And within the next 4 years, every councilman that voted for that was replaced on the council. Now it's a 4-3 vote, so there were 4 of them. Now you talk to them today, they still say we did the right thing, we'll do it again, but it's very unpopular. But so is property taxes. And I use the analogy, I would watch on Facebook, Suzanne Crouch was our lieutenant governor, she ran for governor. She ran on axing the tax, not property tax, income tax. You look at all the comments below, nobody was talking about income tax. They were all saying my property tax is too high. I'm 65, I shouldn't pay any at all, they would say. Right? And so I think she picked the wrong tax to axe, really. And so there's a lot of discontent with property tax. So to me, those counties that made the hard votes shouldn't have to start over again and remake those. But currently that's what we're saying has to happen. So you could say, okay, you lose your 1, we want to go to the full 1.2. You can do that. And it depends. If you're not a property owner, you're gonna see your total tax burden go up because you're not paying property at all. It's all income. If you're a large property owner, now you pay more income tax. Very possibly your tax burden might be less overall, and that's really the way I think that. So that's what additional tax relief through income tax can do for you. It really cut your taxes in a dramatic way. Not saying one county's right, one county's wrong. That's just the way that they've done it. And I like to compare. We used to all be the same county, right? You're the youngest county in Indiana, but we all used to be Jasper, Newton. We're together. We have a lot of similarities, a lot of similar soil types. We have a lot of things that are close together for each one of us. But that's what a different philosophy could do. So go to the next one. But we can certainly come back to this. So again, you've already answered that question. a 1% rate, so your yearly distribution is just right at $3 million currently coming in to your county from that 1% rate. So this is my last slide, and this is about road funding, because I think that's pertinent too, as we're looking at revenue sources. 1461, of course, that was Representative Pressel's bill. He's out of LaPorte County. He's the chairman of the Transportation Committee. Wanted to make major changes to the Community Crossings Grant Program. I think one of the most successful programs that I've seen come out of the state was this matching grant program to get more road funding for our local communities, cities, towns, counties. What's unique about this is pick a town, Brook is eligible for the same amount of dollars as Indianapolis. Now, we changed that a little bit in this bill now, but that's the way this program has been. Every community was on the same footing. Brook would get the same amount as Newton County as a county, which was $1 million. Now it's been changed to $1.5 million. So if you could come up with your match money, there was a lot of opportunity for that. And so $15 registration fee. So, you know, some people say we really instituted, that was back in 2017 when this was passed, instituted really a statewide wheel tax. You pay $15 for every plate at the BMV. That goes into this grant program, as well as additional sales tax money off of fuel tax. So used to, the whole 7% didn't go back into roads. A lot of it went into the state general fund. Now that all goes back into roads through this Community Crossings Grant Program. That's what helped fund that. My concern when it passed out of the House, I voted against this bill. It created, instead of one bucket of money, it created 3 buckets of money. And what the state wants us all to do is to adopt a wheel tax. They say, we've given you another funding source, and about 60 counties have taken advantage of that. No counties in Northwest Indiana have the wheel tax. If you look at the map, it's none of my 4 counties in my legislature district have it either. We just haven't adopted that. And so the match, they said, well, if you have the wheel tax, that's your match money. And I said, I have a county, and I use you guys. I said, I've got a county next to me that has a landfill. And so they could use landfill tipping fee monies as their match money. White County has 550 turbines. They could use turbine money for match money. What makes the difference to the state where the match comes from? That was my point to them. So when it came out of the Senate, they changed that, and it was, if you have the wheel tax, you're still eligible for your maximum amount you are now. We're not going backwards. But if you do have the wheel tax, you're eligible for double the amount you're getting today, which is $1.5 million. So now you're eligible for $3 million plus whatever the wheel tax brings in. But you can adopt the wheel tax at the lowest level. There's no minimum, which you've got the wheel tax and the surtax. You add those together. I think the minimum is $12.50 a plate. Now, I know I was sitting in our caucus and I was doing some factoring, and at $25, I counted up everything on our farm that has a plate, whether that's my parents, myself, or my sons, we're all farmed together. And I came up with 25 either vehicles or most of them were trailers that are plated. Well, that's $625. That's not going to break me. But you add that onto the $10,000 I'm already paying to the BMV, and you're talking about a real increase. And so that's where the rubber, I think, meets the road in a lot of these counties. So just know that's the incentive. They're going to keep pushing and pushing for you to adopt, all of us to adopt the wheel tax as a funding source. Now, Indianapolis made out pretty good on this too. There's a lot of discourse in the General Assembly for Indianapolis, and their streets and roads aren't real great, but they were just eligible for, again, the same $1.5 million you were. So now they're eligible. They can get $50 million off the top, but they have to match that dollar for dollar. Nobody else has to match it dollar for dollar. The small communities of 50,000 or less, counties or municipalities, their match went from 25% down to 20%. So there were some communities, small towns, that said we can't afford that match. So they compensated them a little bit and lowered that. So they did respond a little bit to the lower community. So that's where we're going with road funding. There's still a lot of dollars in community crossings. You're still eligible for those dollars. But that's the encouragement they're doing for you is to adopt tax at some point. So I think that's the last slide. Happy to answer any questions back on taxes and all, but But again, looks like about a 5% loss, for the county as a whole. And every tax unit under there, that changes, but it's mostly in the 4.5% to 5% range. So most each taxing unit, schools included in that will see less revenue from it.
What's the general feedback you got from other counties that you presented to, or the thoughts from them?
Most of them have met with Baker Tilly and kind of know where they're going. Nobody's excited about another tax. I heard the town manager of Goodland get interviewed on the Princeton radio station a couple of weeks ago, was kind of complaining about, well, they're just taking it out of this pocket and now they're going to take it out of this pocket. But those are local decisions. So, you know, school referendum is another thing. We did change some of the referendum law. And so if you're a school that has a referendum, you're not liking that. I mean, I get some of that feedback. I don't think you have any referendums in your schools. You're a new county. White County has a couple that we deal with, but so a referendum, and I think you're going to see more of that because schools are running out of options of funding. So they're going to have a referendum that goes on the ballot. Before that could go on, you could have a special election for a school referendum. The cost of that election you had to compensate the county back because the county, of course, administers the election. But they would choose a special election, not during a primary or general, because less people would come out and they felt like they could get their voters to support it to come out in a special election, have a 10% turnout, and they would get what they wanted. So that's no longer available. And actually, it cannot be in a primary. It has to be in the general because you get a lot more people that normally vote in the general election. And in the past, you would advertise a rate. So you would say, we would like a 10% rate on this fund in the school. Well, what does that mean? So now you have to advertise the actual dollar amount. So if you have a $5 million project, you've got to put on the ballot that I approve for a $5 million project to take place at North Nuclear, whatever that case may be. So that's some other changes we made, but I think there's still a lot of unknowns that I'm not getting a whole lot of response. But again, Representative Thompson, as chairman of Ways and Means, and he has said numerous times, we have 3 more sessions before this fully gets implemented. And we can make changes and tweaks as we find that out. So it's really important for me to have feedback. I pointed out some things about income tax, and I mentioned a few of those that I don't think it's fair the way they're eliminating it, make you readopt everything, once you've already made those hard votes. I think you should just build from where you're already at. But we'll see. We'll try to get some of those things changed. Hopefully that was helpful. I'm not like to be the bearer of bad news, but they're reacting to, you know.
Did you vote for it?
I voted for Senate Bill 1. Yep, and I voted for the budget. They both were approved, and I voted for that funding bill when it came back. I voted against it to start with, and when it came back from the Senate, it was much improved. Where the match, where we were all eligible for our full amount, not half the amount, which that was fine, because that's your decision again as a council on the wheel tax. If you want to institute wheels tax or not, that's a council decision. And of course, you work with your commissioners to see what's needed at the highway department and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's an improvement because ag did get a third of its AV taken off. What I haven't, and I've seen the number, we will still pay less money. Ag will, the 2% cap will pay less property taxes than we do now, even with the shifts from 1 and 3 coming in. I will say this, I did mention this, the part, and I'm going to push for this, that the part that doesn't get any relief is in the 3% category. And that's ag structures, buildings. So that's grain bins, tool sheds, livestock barns. There's no relief for that. And so they are going to pay theirs plus all of these shifts from everybody else. If you're a young person starting out, do you own land? Usually not. A lot of times these young people are starting by maybe getting a contract and building a quad barn. That's the full amount. Or you build a grain bin. You're paying that full amount. There's no relief there. And that really is a disincentive for young folks to get started in agriculture. And that is really unfair, and there's not enough of us to tell that story, so we just need to keep, pushing that to them to show that part needs to be carved out a little bit. There needs to be some relief from that vantage point as well.
It doesn't affect us what's gonna happen to like Benton County when they get their personal property taxes in 2 years. That's gonna hit them worse than me. It's not our problem, but how they would deal with that.
Well, that's a good question. I don't know what their income tax rate is. Now, they do have, I think 3 million a year coming in from their wind. I don't know, Connie, if you know that, but I remember Bruce Buchanan at the time was on the council, and he told me that instead of taking lump sums of dollars from economic development payments, they were spacing them out or spreading them out, and it's like three. So they may be okay from that standpoint, but they might be counting on that for some other project, like they've got broadband throughout Benton County now, they paid for example. That was a county expense because that was important to them. So, everybody lives, you have to live within your means, but you live to whatever your income level is a lot of times, right? And government's no different than that. You know how much money you're coming in, so you can save some of it, or you can invest in whether it's more roads or whatever infrastructure you need. You're a good example of that. You've got water taken out to different communities of Fair Oaks and White. So you've invested some of those dollars. Well, less dollars come in, but yet your standard of living is here, and now your income is down here. That's a tough adjustment to bring that back. And that's really what we're all kind of faced with is, you're probably gonna have to raise income tax. I mean, that's what the state kind of wants you to do. And that's fine, but that's not an easy thing to message though to the taxpayers, because when Senate Bill 1 passed first, when it came out is right about when tax bills came out. So people are having all this expectation of relief for their tax bills. Well, because we know that's last year's tax bill payable this year, right? Not everybody understands how that works. So they came out, they're hearing all this hype about lower taxes, and their tax bill went up from last year. Then when we passed the budget a few weeks later, it's about when Form 11s came out. So they're seeing what next year's assessed values have really shot up. Now, that doesn't mean your taxes are gonna go up. So, tax base goes up, your rate should go down. And so there's just a lot of discontentment and really people really not believing that you're really gonna lower their taxes. But the estimate is about 75% of taxpayers will see a lower tax bill in 26 than they did in 25, homeowners. And I think that's probably going to be right from a homeowner perspective. Anyway, hope that's helpful, Matt. I appreciate
Yeah, and thank you very much. I appreciate
Appreciate
it.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
That's you, with money.
Guys.
I wanted to introduce you guys to the 29th Jury and League of Woodland. So here with us. We're going to touch on our ag strategy. So Newton County is part of an 8-county surrounding ag strategy. Newton, Jasper, Warren County, White, Pulaski. And we're finding it very important for value added and to promote agribusiness. Our counties are rural, we're a little different than the strong urban areas. Yeah, those are on one sheet. There's 6 ones. And so I wanted them to just come and give a little brief presentation on what economic development is working on in terms of agribusiness and agritourism attractions. And we meet every month. Jasper County, our 8 counties do. And they're working very closely with me, trying to promote agribusiness. And we are in talks with some prospects, with some pretty good sized investments and things of that nature. But we understand that it takes a lot of steps to get these businesses to locate here. So we're working on that. And we're making some good progress. And so I just wanted to open the floor to Connie and Lee, so she can kind of, and Lee can talk to about what we're working on. And if you guys have any questions afterwards, please ask.
Well, first of all, I want to commend Mike. He has done a phenomenal job in the short amount of time that he has been here as Economic Development Director. He's really just, embraced the role, and he's really studied and learned a lot about it. So great choice here.
So before we get started, we can all relax. We're not here to ask for any money.
Yeah.
So you can relax.
So again, I'm Connie Neininger. I live in White County. I've been running this area for a while. I retired from the Indiana State Department of Agriculture about 5.5 years ago. Prior to that, I was the Economic Development Director in White County during the development of several of the renewable energy projects, some of the other manufacturing opportunities that were there. So after I retired, I decided I really wanted to help these rural communities. And the reason being is that we're going to talk about here in just a moment. Lee, I'll let you introduce yourself first.
Sure, I'm Lee Llewellyn. I spent 10 years as the CEO of the Indiana Economic Development Association, not corporation. It's the not-for-profit that Mike and his peers in economic development are members of. It was during that period of time, maybe I can get it started here. During that period of time, I was summoned to the offices of the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. And they had a state map up on the wall, and they had red X's across a bunch of counties. And they said, so we wanted to call you over here and show you, we've just done an analysis, and we've got like 45 counties that haven't seen an economic development project in 10 years. And I looked at them and I said, it looks like most of these counties are rural counties. And they said, yeah, that's right. And so what are you guys going to do about that? And they said, well, nothing. We just thought you'd want to know that. So at that point, Connie was with the Indiana State Department of Agriculture, and we created an economic development, or rural economic development advisory group that included Connie. We had Greg Slifer from Farm Bureau. We had somebody from the Corn Marketing Council and a lot of the economic developers from rural areas. And we started, talking about why is it that we're seeing this dearth of new opportunities in rural communities. One of the things that emerged was, well, every economic developer in Indiana is told they should be attracting manufacturing. And so when we would talk to those economic developers, we'd say, so what's your goal? And it's like, next Honda plant. And it's like, well, that Honda plant's not going to come to a rural area. But as we started talking about this, we realized there's a lot of different kinds of manufacturing. You don't have to be manufacturing transmissions or brake pads, but you could be manufacturing chicken tenders, or you could be manufacturing taco shells, or you could be manufacturing yogurt or ice cream. It's still manufacturing. The difference is, if you're talking about taco shells or you're talking about ice cream, you're talking about raw materials that are produced in a place like Newton County. And so we started looking for ways in which we could attract that kind of manufacturing to rural communities using the raw materials that are already produced here, and as a way of now bringing that investment back into rural counties. Connie was then engaged for a couple of years in working with 58 counties, 5 regions around the state to develop strategies for doing just that. And the only region that has really started to pursue that in an active sense is the 8-county region that Mike is now a part of, that's Newton County's a part of. And Connie's going to talk to you about then how we are deploying that strategy in this region and with Newton County. So now back to you.
Okay, so when we started thinking about this, we realized that we have some great assets in these rural communities, but most of the crops that are raised here are shipped out across the country, across the world, and they're shipped out as raw material. And from an economic development standpoint, that really says that we're leaving dollars under the table because we're letting somebody else add that value to that raw material. And so the first thing we did is we worked with the Purdue Center for Regional Development to develop these ag asset maps. I don't know if you've ever looked at the ag census. The USDA National Agricultural Statistics Service does a 5-year ag census. Great information, a lot of information. I used to have to use that almost daily. I could find something one time, but I could never find it a second time. It wasn't user-friendly information. So PCRD, Purdue Center for Regional Development, worked with USDA, and we took all of that great data and put it into user-friendly maps that shows every county in the state. It shows all the crops that they grow, all the livestock that they raise. So for example, corn, it shows how many acres were planted, how many acres were irrigated, how much went into silage, how much went into seed corn, how much was in sweet corn. You have all of that information at our the fingertips now that can tell you exactly what's grown and raised here in our region.
So these are virtual maps, so they're on the website, so when you ask a question, so you have the map of Indiana, and if you choose corn, then you see bubbles that show up on each county. The bubbles are relative size of how much corn is grown in each of those counties, and when you click on that bubble, then you get that drop-down information. So it is very user-friendly and allows us to look very quickly at where is the concentration of things that are grown in each region. Sorry.
So we use that as an economic development tool. So if we can look at those maps and say, okay, we have a concentration of milk in this region. What are we doing with that milk? You know, are we working to attract the value-added processing that can take that milk and add it, you know, add the value, process it, make it user-friendly for the consumer to drink immediately? And so we're like, okay, so that works from that standpoint. But also if you have a food processor that says, you know what, we're making a soup that we want some sweet corn. Okay, we look at the map and say, where is the sweet corn grown today? And then we can help connect. So we're, you know, in the business of connecting the producers to the users, you know, whether it's the actual consumer or whether it's a processing facility. So we started out with that data, and then we again collected even more data based on the number of companies within a region, the number of employees within a region, working within every industry cluster or every industry sector. One of those sectors is agribusiness and food processing. For our 8-county PIRPC region, we realize that agribusiness and food processing is the largest industry cluster, not only here within the region, within the state, but in the country. We analyze what we call a location quotient that says, okay, agribusiness and food processing is over 12 times more concentrated in these 8 counties than anywhere else in the country. Automotive manufacturing doesn't even show up on the list. So why are we trying to attract a Honda plant when our greatest asset is agribusiness and food processing? So first thing we did is we asked the regions to define themselves. And we have economic development regions, we have workforce development regions, but we wanted ag regions, and it had to make sense. And so, you know, naturally we looked at these 8 counties. Some of them said, well, maybe we should include Tippecanoe County, Lafayette. Well, when we start including those metropolitan areas in ag data, it basically depresses all of the ag information. And their biomedical, their, you know, their sensor industries will overshadow everything ag. So we realize that, yes, we need those large metropolitan areas, but they need us more. Because what is the one industry that will always be? Food. We will always need food. And so we started gathering this information. We looked at the ag asset maps, and we realized agribusiness and food processing is number 1. Transportation and logistics is our second industry cluster that's important, because everything we grow and raise has to be transported somewhere. It could be even into cold storage. And then advanced materials. Again, farming is one that is always looking at what materials, whether it's the ag bag, whether it's the silos, that they put up for their grain. There's different types of materials, so those are important. And our goal is to see how all of these different industries connect to agriculture. Biomedical and biotech. Do you realize we have an industry here, a business here in this region that is growing Yucatan hogs? What are they? They are the hogs that are the most like the human body as far as their growth rate and their types of organs. They go into Cook Medical. And again, a lot of people don't even realize what can be done with agriculture. And then, of course, energy, because everybody needs energy in some way or another. And so those 5 clusters are what we realize that we need to focus on in this region. So we have the data. We collected all that data, we looked at it, we called on companies throughout the region to ask, because data is only as good as data is. But there's a lot of information when we're talking about the supply chain that you can't find anywhere in data. So in other words, when we talk supply chain from the beginning, when that seed is planted in the ground or that calf is born to the moment that is on the consumer's table, there's a lot of steps. It could be the slaughterhouse. It could be the dairy processing. It could be the transportation, the cold storage, the cutting, the packing, and then into the actual retail business. So when we look at that supply chain, we realize that there's some gaps. And our goal is to fill all those gaps in the supply chain. For example, I was talking with a sheep herder that said, you know what, I need some nutrients for our sheep. I was able to connect them with Belstra Milling, and they were able to supply the nutrients that they needed. So it's making those connections, and by calling on those companies, which is an economic development project. Most economic developers call on their companies on a regular basis, but we're asking specific questions when we call on them. What do you raise or grow? What do you do with it? How's it processed? Where do you ship it to? What inputs do you need to get that? And that gives us all the information we need to say we need to fill in the gaps. So in the case of dairy, okay, do we have a lot of dairy processing in this region that milk does not have to be transported hours away? We can process it right here. And so we are then transporting a finished product to the stores. And so through this, we developed 4 key strategies for our dairy strategy in this region. One is the regional food systems. How do we take what we grow and raise here and get it into the hands of our consumers? How do we connect our consumers with our products? And how do we help those entrepreneurs? In fact, we were at a farmer's market. We had another partner that's working with us that is attending all the farmers markets, and there's an individual making cookies that she's selling. Well, you know what? Maybe she's ready to take that to the next step and start processing those cookies and packaging it and selling it in grocery stores. And so we want to help those entrepreneurs build their business, whether it's looking for commissaries, kitchens, commercial kitchens that they can go in and try their small batch information, or their small batch recipes, or whether it's a commissary that's going to help a food truck where they can collect the food for that food truck, store it, and then when they're ready to take the truck out, they can pull it and then fill the truck and take it to location. The food supply chain, as I mentioned, one of the things we realize we are missing in this region and also in the whole state is meat processing. We have no USDA beef inspectors here in Indiana. So if you've got a slaughterhouse that's going to cut, a full meat packer that's going to cut beef one day, he's got to call that inspector in from either Kentucky or Illinois, pay him from the moment they leave their house to come up there and watch as he cuts those, the beef. Well, we realize that there is a state certification program that if all of our meat cutters are state certified, they can sell in the retail industry and even across state lines because we have reciprocal agreements. But that's our state's best known secret. So we're trying to share that information with them. Also cold storage. We are missing out. We need more cold storage here within our region. And so that's some of the things we're working to attract. And then again, co-packing. So you have somebody with a great recipe, but they don't have a commercial kitchen. Maybe there's already a food processor out there that would say, you know what? We don't run on Fridays. I would open up and you could use my equipment on Fridays to make your small batch, package it, and take it with you and sell it. And so we're working with these companies to try to find if there's those types of businesses that are willing to open their doors to our neighbors here. The ag workforce is the third strategy that we're focusing on. We need CDL drivers. Yes, St. Joe here down the road has a program. They only allow 5 people in it at a time. So those are things we're working on expanding. We also need a CDL training track. And we're working on that, trying to get some area that we could build a track here in the region, again, to help increase the CDL drivers. And also a farm labor database. Most farmers, if they need harvest help, they can't go on Indeed or Indiana Career Connect and advertise, we want, 3 combine drivers for 2 months. They don't allow those types. So we're working on developing our own regional ag website that will have a labor database on it that farmers can put in there and says, okay, I need some summertime help, or I'm harvesting my tomatoes and I need some assistance at this time. And then the fourth strategy is regulatory streamlining. We need to realize that regulations, permittings, and processes does affect every business, but probably ag more than any other type of business. How many of you know that Indiana is a right to farm state? We have an Indiana code, right to farm, out there that has been there since 2016, that basically states that if somebody builds a nice, beautiful house out there in the country and Farmer Joe down the road decides he's going to add another quad barn for his hogs, and they complain and said, no, I don't want to smell that. That's what we call a nuisance lawsuit. And Indiana's right to farm code protects them against that. Ag was here first. Ag should be allowed to grow and expand. Just because you built your house in an ag area doesn't mean you can stop ag. And so we are working with all of the counties to put that into their own uniform code to say that we adopt the Indiana Right to Farm Act as a county code, and that people will realize then that we do support agriculture. And so we've talked with your planning department about that. I'll be attending the area plan commission meeting here in the next few weeks to hopefully adopt a Right to Farm Act here for the county. It's already there in Indiana code, but it just seems to get lost. And so we're wanting to make sure that happens. And so working to make sure our statement of procedures and processes across the region are supportive of each other, especially if you have a project that sits right on the county line or right next to the county line that may, flow over. Both counties, should have similar processes and permitting standards. We don't want to put those businesses in undue stress to meet 2 different codes or 2 different standards if they're wanting to grow and expand. So those are our 4 strategies, working very closely with Mike to call on the companies. Again, we are developing ag parks within the region. You have a great one, TriPoint. Now we're working to promote and share the information about these ag parks. Again, each ag park in each county may be focusing on something different. We know Newton County is going to focus on dairy. Benton County may be focusing on meat processing, even though they have some dairy too. But still, each county has to select their key target. But yet we still work as a region. And then we'll be notifying site selectors who are looking for sites, what we have here in this region and how we support food processing and agriculture. And that's important because Leah's talked with several site selectors about what we're doing here. Lee, you want to share a little bit there?
Well, site selectors are the people that companies hire to help them find a new location for expanding or relocating. And so there are site selectors that specialize in food and beverage processing companies. And when we've talked to them and we've told them about the process that we're working on here in Indiana, what they've told us is there is no other state anywhere in the country right now that is doing that. And we can tell you that right now, yours is the only region in the state of Indiana that's doing that. So you are really moving to the top of the list in terms of opportunities for attracting value-added agriculture, simply because we are sort of putting your region at the top of the list in terms of those site selectors and what they're looking for. And really through a lot of Connie's activities, we have 3 or 4 prospects now that are looking for sites in this region. The problem is that and fortunately Newton County is not one of the counties that we're having a challenge with, but there are a number of counties in the region that have no sites available. And the reality in terms of economic development today, you can't play the game of if they come, we will build it. That does not work. You have to be ready. You have to build it so that when those companies are looking, they're looking for the shortest time to market that they can get. And so having facilities and having an ag park ready for them that allows them to get in, build and begin producing product quickly is what they're looking for. And right now you're at the top of the list. So that's where we are. And as we've been working also with Don Lamb, the director of the Indiana State Department of Agriculture. He's really looking at this region as a pilot for how they would like to replicate things. So again, you're at the top of the list here, and Mike has really been a great supporter in helping us go. Yes, sir.
If you don't mind, I had the opportunity to listen to you speak at Curbsy the other day. And one of the stories you shared with me that's kind of stuck in my mind was the indoor shrimp. And you know that story?
Yes, I do.
Share
So,
that with us real quick.
okay, I can share that. In Benton County, RDM Shrimp. If you've not had their shrimp, try it. It's phenomenal. But right now, they have to buy all their feed from Pennsylvania. There is no feed store that makes shrimp feed here in Indiana. What's the main ingredient in shrimp feed? Soybeans. It's like, so that's one of those things like, wait a minute, why aren't we bringing something in like, to help support? Again, looking at that supply chain and how many people need it, those are the what I call lost opportunities that we are wanting to attract into this region. So yeah, so thank you for reminding that. So you've got the executive summary on the back, on the bottom is the Curbsy website that holds the whole ag strategy. It's like a 30-some page document. If you really want to get into the meat of what we did to develop these strategies.
No pun intended.
Yeah, it is listed there on the website until we get our website up and running. And do you want to talk about the workshop or you want?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also passed around a flyer. During our meetings, obviously this is a regional ag strategy, and Connie and Lee work really well with me on what is good for Newton County, just as they do with Jasper and everything else. So we're target focused on what to attract that best fits the needs here for Newton County. But part of this, during our conversations, we've talked about there's so many things with SB1, and there's just so many changes in that roller coaster right now with taxes and incentives and incentive packages, and what do companies look for, what might be good for one company might not be what another one wants. And so we asked them as a region if we could put a short workshop together with some folks that can maybe provide some of those answers and some guidance. So September 11th over at Jasper County, since it's centrally located, hosting a economic development, agriculture-based seminar over there. So I just wanted to make sure that you were all aware of that. And I'm also going to invite all of the town elected officials, and then obviously our redevelopment commission. So if you know any of those, a lot of you are on our redevelopment commission and authority, and I'll send it out to them too. So it was just another sense of education that we wanted to offer for our counties, being that I know in the last few months, our county, I've been very busy with prospects, with companies, both north, middle and south. And obviously, we have a lot of talks and they look for a lot of things. I provide a lot of information. But we're competing against the entire state, the Midwest, the country, and things of that nature. So that's why I don't go into great detail about any projects that I'm working on, because most of the time they're confidential, but just be rest assured that I'm working with several and we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in these projects throughout the entire county. So we'll continue to do that. And then Connie and Lee are always just a phone call, text, email away, that if I say, hey, I'm kind of looking for this type of information, where can I get this from? They respond quickly. Or if I call with Lee with some questions or some guidance on something, he'll respond quick too. So it's been a great relationship, and I've been in this position for about 6 months, and I started attending as soon as I came on, so I had to learn about this strategy myself. But we've been very active in implementing it for Newton County to attract agribusiness and manufacturing around the agriculture sector. So just want to be rest assured that we are doing some work behind the scenes for you. So
Any other questions?
Has any of the strategy actually been implemented in this area yet?
Yes, we actually have. Well, the Right to Farm, Benton County adopted the Right to Farm Act already. Newton County, like I said, we're meeting with the APC here in a couple weeks. Jasper County, we've been going through the process. Pulaski County already has the Right to Farm in their ordinance. Let's see. White County doesn't have it in their ordinance, but they have a document everyone who requests a building permit must sign that says they understand the Right to Farm Act if they're building in an ag area. And then on the, again, the workforce side, we've been working with Vincennes University. They are looking to come up in this area to do a remote program. They have what they call a John Deere repair technician program, that anyone out of high school that goes to work at a John Deere dealership, they can apply for this program at no cost to the student. And they, right now they have to go down to Vincennes, and we're hoping to get that up here in this area where John Deere brings new equipment in, they actually break the equipment and have to repair it, but then they come out of that class with a certification to repair all John Deere equipment. And so we're in conversation with Vincennes to bring them up here and offer remote programs, and actually working with John Deere to try to get a place where we can put some of that equipment up here so they don't have to drive to Vincennes. Benton County has started their first meat processor. It's just a really small, he would always cut deer for people. Well, now he has turned his barn into a meat processing site, and he's working to become state certified at this point in time. So that was one of our first successes. Benton County actually turned down a 6,500 head dairy project because this was before we had the Right to Farm Act in there, because they had some people who built new houses and they complained enough, and the county turned it down. Well, we found them a site in Warren County, so there's a new dairy being built in Warren County, so we kept it
That
with,
costs us a dairy, you doing,
pardon?
that costs us another dairy, you're doing that.
In what way?
You're looking for one out here,
Oh, okay,
then when you open up Warren County, it's something like that.
okay. Well, that's good, right? No? Oh. So you said it's causing him,
Well, they were looking here for the second site, Benton County didn't want it.
oh, okay. Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you said. So, well, we can always try for another one though. And I think that's where, you know, and even dairies are part of economic development, which a lot of times most don't look at livestock as economic development, but they really are, and they add tax value to the community. So we've got that going on right now, working with Monon Meat Processing. They had a fire in White County, they burnt down. So trying to find a new location for them because they were pretty much landlocked. So that's another process. We also have a meat processor. Again, these aren't large Indiana Packer type meat processors. A meat processor that just received their BZA approval up in Stark County. And they have the facility already, and so they'll be looking to remodel that and get that up and running. Because right now, especially on the poultry side, we have very few local meat cutters that will do poultry. And so most of our poultry farms have to transport their chickens to Ohio to be slaughtered. And then if they can't get them cut and packaged, they have to put them into cold storage. And that many hours in the truck on a bird is real stress on the meat. So we're working on getting that facility up in Stark County. Oh, there's a drone company in Benton County that started out with just the small drones. He now has a very large drone, I mean, very large. He is flying in between all the dairy barns and spraying for flies. You can actually pull up to some of these dairy farms, roll down your windows and not be bombarded with flies. He goes in every week and sprays for flies. And so that business is expanding, that we've worked with quite a bit. Other successes, what am I?
And I know, Tom, with this strategy is we've been really trying to market, and bring prospects to try and wind up there because it's going to be beneficial to Newton County, with some of the loss of water and stuff, cascades for regional water and sewage and things of that nature. And due to some of the work, of many people, but also with the work of the strategy, you know, we've been speaking with prospects and stuff like that up there, in our county specifically. So, when it comes to agriculture, ag-based, that's where this data helps us establish why we should be chosen over somebody else. It's because of our ag-based workforce that we have and the data that can back that up for anyone to come down anywhere in this county. We can show that that's a highlight and that's a backbone of our community. And that's why people locate here instead of outside the region. So that's where it's really been specific for us. It's just countywide, these ag businesses that I've been speaking with, to have and establish an ag strategy and for them to see that we're placing that at the forefront of our business development is incentivizing for them. So I'm hoping that pays off, but that's where it helps us here.
Yeah, it's premature, but there are some companies that are specifically looking at Newton County. And again, I think Connie's been instrumental in helping to develop some marketing materials that again puts your opportunity and puts your ag site sort of up in that airstream among those site selectors who would never have seen Newton County. So I think there's a reasonable expectation that within a few months, you'll see some announcements coming out of Newton County, but it's premature to talk about those right now.
So yeah, so we have a lot of things in the works. Lee and I have only been doing this just a little over a year that we've been working to implement. I've started April of last year.
Which sounds like a long time, but in economic development, I mean, the reality is that in many cases, I mean, it takes multiple years. And I think the fact though, that when you start paying attention to something the way we are this, and we start getting, you know, the economic development directors and elected officials and other stakeholders talking about it, it does condense the time frame, and we are starting to see a lot more activity than probably what we would see otherwise. And again, we're trying to hold your region up in your county really as the pilot for the entire state. So you guys will see some of the success probably before anybody else. So
Got another question about the Wayne 2 Farm Act. You brought up that company that utilizes arms to provide
For medical
search cells. Yeah, well, we have one that proposed to come to Newton County that neighbors didn't really like. And they were pretty much rushed off, just by the same company that will the right to farm act protect people that are coming into the county?
Yes.
if you have the area zoned for ag, then that is sort of the prevailing use. And so, yes, that should give you the leverage to be able to say, no, this was zoned agriculture before a home was built in that area. Is that right?
Yes, the code actually states not just expansion of existing, but also new industry into the ag area that is ag related. That, yes, and now they still have to meet all the item, guidelines, and BOA with the animals. But just to be a nuisance is, I don't like the smell, you know, again, fact-based. Oh, they're gonna take our water. Well, in most cases, no, they're not gonna take all the water. And so if they meet all of your code, all of your permitting and your zoning requirements, then, and people are just
And it was
complaining.
zoned ag before the residential was put in there, then that is the prevailing use.
And it, not just the actual site, but neighboring sites are zoned ag too.
One last question.
Mhm.
Talk
You
to
can ask two.
What's that?
I said you can ask two.
Yeah, we still have another meeting.
Okay, all right.
Right, I'll make this quick. You probably already, mentioned it, but just the crop prices, export versus. Has there been any issues that you've seen that would, make people actually export to get more money and current market values compared to?
What we are looking at on the cost and working with Purdue Center for Regional Development on a lot of the analysis is because if they are going to export, they're gonna have to pay the transportation costs. And so the question is the price of that they're receiving, the return for exporting, covering the cost of transportation too? And so everyone is different. There are some that will still say they want to export. But I think it's because we've not given them the opportunities to utilize what we have here within the region, and we don't have the processing. And so we need that processing to support them keeping it here. Otherwise, it's just as simple to just, you know, export it and get it out of their hands and they don't have to worry about it. Unfortunately,
Well, so it's not quite the same thing, but Corey Murphy, who's the economic developer in Henry County, talks about a corn farmer there who was exporting all of his corn. And this went to an ethanol plant. And so when he started transporting, when he was selling his corn to the ethanol plant rather than exporting it, his profits went up $100,000 in 1 year. And so, again, the difference between having a user that is nearby and you're not paying to export it or even paying to send, you know, like the chicken farmer that we've talked to, poultry farmer, he's transporting his birds 8 hours into Ohio. That's a cost that if he had a processor here, he would not be paying that cost. So that's what we're talking about in terms of here versus someplace else.
and it's a change to the philosophy. I mean, our commodity crops have always, well, just export them. But how many farmers are really struggling financially? Because, you know, even the returns for export commodities is not what it used to be. Because there are so many other challenges at it. So if we can give them a different opportunity to keep it here and receive just as much, if not more revenue. And plus, then we're putting the food into the consumer's hands, you know, it's a mindset change. It really is. And so it's not gonna happen overnight.
Thank you for your time.
But yeah, thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Appreciate
Time and
it.
attention.
Any questions? Call Mike.
Recess for 5 minutes. Council, are you guys done then?
Guys, I make. Vic, oh, before you go, September 11th to 12th, I'll be available by phone, and I'm doing my guys' honoring legal education hours on those days. So I will be out of here. Yes.
11th and 12th.
Yep.
Before you run off, are we done? You're on the.
I need you guys to make a motion.
Yeah, I make a motion,
and-
your council, your second.
Nice spot.
Motion made, second, adjourn, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Who made the motion?
Me.
Second? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right, we're on the rush.
All right. Take it easy.
They were only supposed to be 10 minutes.
Also,
We're gonna start our days and then it's, there's a way to reduce the rates, maybe every other.
I just, it's that.